Hi, welcome to this episode of The Daily. My name is Brendan Malone. Well, often I have people ask me, why the heck do you believe in God? Why are you a theist? Isn't the overwhelming amount of evidence pointing in the other direction? Well, quite simply put, no, it's not. And so I thought I'd do an episode today explaining the three main reasons why I believe there is a God. So I guess some people might be surprised by this, others might not. But it's not about the fact that I was raised this way, or I'm some sort of rigid fundamentalist, and I've been brainwashed. For me, it's about looking at reality, looking at the world around me, assessing what I see, and then making a judgment call. Because ultimately, a lot of life in this regard is kind of like that. You know, you can't pull out the magic silver bullet, just like an atheist can't pull out the magic silver bullet and say, oh, look, here's proof there is no God. And such proof doesn't exist. So it's a matter of weighing the evidence and then making a call, I think, based on the best, and what I think is the best and most reasonable proposition, looking at all the evidence. And so for me, there's three things. Number one is I see a logic to the cosmos that makes a lot of sense to me. Now, I don't just mean in a material sense, the way things are ordered when it comes to the world of physics. I mean when it comes to the human experience. There is a logic to living a virtuous and good life and being altruistic and living a moral life, which is a fundamental tenet of a belief in a theistic deity. There is an order and a coherence to all of that kind of stuff that to me speaks of an author. And now some people try and argue, well, isn't this just sort of, evolutionary biology? You do altruistic things because there's some benefit for you, or, there's lots of evolutionary advantages in doing certain altruistic things. Well, sure, certain altruistic things, there are evolutionary advantage to. So, for example, saving your own child from a burning building, you can argue there's an evolutionary advantage there because, by saving your own offspring, you are ensuring your lineage, your DNA heritage will carry on, you're ensuring, that your line will survive. However, there's lots of other things that we do as well from an altruistic perspective that make absolutely no evolutionary sense at all. So why would people run into a burning building to save a total stranger, even a stranger who might be considered an enemy to them prior to that point, or even a stranger who they may have considered a threat to them before that point, or even a stranger who just in sort of a generic human level, let's say, is an elderly person and has no ability to reproduce and therefore carry on the human lineage. Why would you run into a building and risk your own life, override the strongest drive that we have, which is our instinct for survival, and do that? That doesn't make any sense from an evolutionary perspective. It just doesn't make any sense. However, I think from a faith-based perspective, it makes a lot of sense. And for me, the mere fact that we would look at someone who runs into a building to save someone in that situation, and we call them a hero, and we look up to them and we think, wow, I hope I have the courage to do that one day. And we instinctively know, we don't need to be told, we instinctively know that was the right thing to do. To me, that speaks of a logic, a design, an order, if you like, in the human experience that is given to us by an author who has created us to seek out the good. Look, even people, think about it, even people who are mentally unwell and do very evil things, they still mistakenly, but they still believe that they're doing the good by doing these evil things. There seems to be this drive in us to seek out the good. Even a person who takes their own life in the pit of despair, they don't do it because they are trying to hurt other people or because they are wanting to make a mere statement, or certainly not in 99.999% of the cases. They do it because they're in such a pit of despair, they're desperately seeking out the good still. They think that this will alleviate the evil, the suffering that they feel, and they think this is the path to finding the good. Now, obviously it's not, but their drive is ordered towards the good. Why does that drive exist? Because there are plenty of examples. As I said, taking your own life is a situation where you've lost everything at that point. So why is there such a strong drive towards seeking out the good? To me, it speaks to the fact that we are actually beings who are created with a particular end in mind. And if there is a particular end in mind, then there must be an author of that particular end or outcome that is desired for us. Number two, when I look around the world, I see something that this is an argument that C.S. Lewis made, and which I read and which I found very, very compelling for me. I see the fact that every other desire that we have has a real object that can satisfy it. And that makes a lot of sense. So the desire for food we call hunger, and there's a real object called food that can satisfy that desire. There is a desire that we have for water. to quench our thirst. There is liquid that exists that we can consume, water. There's a real object that will actually satisfy that desire. We desire intimacy. These are universal human desires that we have. I'm not just talking about someone's desire to own a Lamborghini. I'm talking about the fundamental desires that we all share in common as human persons. So the desire for intimacy. There is a real thing called intimacy with another human person. There's a real object that can actually satisfy that desire. It exists in the world and we can attain it. Now, that makes a lot of sense from an evolutionary perspective. However, there is one desire that has been consistent throughout all of human history for the vast majority of human beings, and that is a desire for the divine, a desire for God, a desire for spirituality. We seek these things out. We have since the beginning of time. Now, as C.S. Lewis pointed out, this doesn't really make sense if there isn't a real object, if there isn't something divine, there isn't a God that exists, or gods that exist that can actually satisfy that desire. Why would we have evolved with a desire that has no meaning? Why would we have evolved with a desire for something that does not exist when every other universal desire that we have is geared around meeting a genuine need and helping our flourishing? So why would we have this one desire that is so universal? It's been with us from the beginning of time. The majority of people experience that. Why does that desire exist if there's no real object that exists that can actually satisfy it? He said, from an evolutionary perspective, that doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. Not only that, because this desire potentially can cause us harm. If you have evolved with a desire that is completely delusional and you are driven towards it, even people who would happily go to martyrdom, for example, they've done something completely counter to evolution. If there is no God, they've just ended a potential, the genetic pool has been weakened, something's been lost by their martyrdom. So why do we have this desire? From an evolutionary perspective, it really doesn't make sense. From a faith-based perspective, it does, because there is a real object. There is a God who can satisfy that desire that human persons have had universally and for, since the beginning of time. And lastly, the last reason I think and believe firmly that there is a God is because of what we know about the material world and what we know about physics and science. All of this, to me, points to the fact that there is an author driving this. And this is not a debate about evolution versus science. I don't have any conflict there. There's no issue there for me at all. Instead, this really gets back to the heart of the matter. Why should all life, and I'm just talking about animals and plants and other things that may have evolved, I'm talking about the very fundamentals, the living things, the building blocks. How the heck can that life spring up from nothing? And why would it spring up for no reason? Why would nothing produce something? How the heck can that even be possible? So to me, it makes absolutely no sense to embrace this idea that nothing suddenly, without any purpose or reason, sprang everything or gave birth to the things that would form everything. That non-life has produced life. It's so contrary to everything we know about reality. To me, it doesn't make any philosophical or logical sense to go down that path. Now, some people sort of try and get around that and say, what about multiverse theory and other theories about, but all those theories are doing is they are moving the question back a bit further down the ladder. They're not answering the question. So if you say, what about the multiverse theory, which is a highly speculative theory, by the way, but the multiverse theory, even if the multiverse theory proves to be true, that still doesn't answer the question, what gave rise to that framework? And why did it come from something non-living? Now, some people say, well, maybe the universe is eternal. I think that obviously there's scientific evidence that points to the other direction, that says the universe did have a beginning. But let's say the universe is eternal, or this is your theory, your belief, but it's eternal. Aren't you just simply positing now the universe in place of God? So when a theist says to you, because often people say, well, how can there be this eternal being that always just was? That makes no sense, because everything has to have a beginning. And that's the common response that you get from people who are atheists and who don't believe. Well, isn't the same argument then going to apply to the universe? How can there be something that just exists? And doesn't it kind of make even less sense to put your faith in an eternal universe rather than an eternal being, that has intelligence and order and is directing things? Because I mean that in the sense of a universe that has just universally existed and eternally existed would just be blind matter. And as I said, everything that we know about the world points to the fact that matter doesn't just arise out of nothing for no reason. And so if it's always going to be universal, then aren't we applying these properties to matter that we wouldn't really apply in any other sort of situation? To me, it just, it doesn't make a lot of sense. So those are the three primary reasons why I am a theist, why I have faith in God. As you see, it's got nothing to do with any sort of crazy indoctrination or to do with debates about evolution versus creationism or anything like that. Just there's no debate there for me. There is no issue. I think science is awesome, and the more we discover about science, I think the more it points us to the fact that there is a God who underpins all that we experience in this life. And not only that, but I look at the history of science and I see the profound involvement of faith in that. In fact, it's the Christian faith that really sets modern scientific progress in motion, because the Christian faith believes that there are things that you can know and that you can study and understand, and that starts with theology and then branches out and grows from there. And all of a sudden we began looking at the material world as human beings and saying, hey, yeah, we can know things about this, we can study, we can make observational experiments, etc., etc., etc. And it's actually Christianity that gives rise, despite the common urban legends, it's actually Christianity that gives rise to our scientific quest in the first place. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow on The Daily.